Welcome to this online lecture for Modern Asia. Today we are going to conclude the topic that we began in class last week, and that of course was China's Civil War and the birth of two Chinas. So anyway, as we're going through here, please take some good notes, and if you have any questions, please email them to me or we'll talk about them in class. World War II was an especially complicated conflict for China. That's because China faced not one war, but three. One war was between Chiang Kai-shek's GMD and the Japanese invaders. A second war featured China's communists versus the Japanese. The third war, of course, was a civil war between the GMD and the CCP. Ultimately, Chiang was convinced to make peace with the communists in the interest of fighting the Japanese. The plan was successful. With the help of the Allied powers, the United States and Great Britain, China defeated the Japanese. Still, China's problems were far from over. After Russia, no one suffered greater losses in World War II than China. China lost about 20 million dead. They also lost most of their business and industry, which lay in ruins from the Japanese invasion. Finally, World War II will increase tensions between the GMD and the CCP. Don't be fooled by the peace treaty that the two signed during the war in order to defeat the Japanese. Once the war was over, the CCP and the GMD will scramble to assemble weapons and to seize territory that they would need in the future civil war that both sides knew was coming. The map to the right shows where things stood in 1946 at the beginning of the last stage in China's civil war. The CCP, or the Chinese Communists, were dominant in the north, and especially in Manchuria. The GMD, or the Nationalists, remained strong in the south and the east, especially in the cities. Initially, it looked as though all of the advantages were on the side of the GMD. However, the CCP quickly began to build its support among the peasant population. Remember Mao's pamphlet on the need to organize the peasant population. We talked about this in one of our earlier lectures. He divided the peasantry into multiple categories, from landless peasants through landlords. Once in control of various regions of China, the CCP began to put Mao Zedong's plan into action. Wherever the CCP was in power, land reform followed. Typically, land was taken from the exploiter classes and given to the exploited classes. This won the Communists significant support among the poorest peasants in China. Ultimately, the PLA, or the People's Liberation Army, which is the army of the Chinese Communists, will boast a force of more than 1 million men. Still, they were outnumbered initially by Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces. Thus, rather than seeking big battles, they concentrated initially on quick guerrilla strikes. Basically, they tried to fight a guerrilla-style warfare. Meanwhile, those living under the rule of the GMD and Chiang Kai-shek began to chafe against the corruption of the government, as well as the strict dictatorship of Chiang Kai-shek. To pay for his war against the communists, Chiang piled one tax after another on the people. But much of the money went into the pockets of Chiang's officials, rather than going to build up China's industry or to actually pay for the war. In other words, Chiang Kai-shek's government was incredibly corrupt. Chiang also began to crack down on those who opposed his rule. This led those in the cities to join the communist cause. So let me just recap for a second. While Mao Zedong and the CCP is building support among the peasants, the landless peasants, to the north, Chiang is alienating those who would have supported him in the south. He's alienating the people who live in the cities, those who traditionally would have supported his government. In 1948, the PLA went on the offensive. They took the city of Beijing, which was the traditional capital of China. And Chiang Kai-shek's armies were now in full retreat. Facing defeat, Chiang will appeal to the United States. A Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West had broken out in Europe in the aftermath of World War II. Chiang raised the specter of a communist takeover of China. He even sent his wife to the United States to meet with the U.S. President Harry Truman. Still, despite fears of a communist China, the U.S. was wary of Chiang. The corruption and the weakness of his government was well known. Thus, while the U.S. continued to pour money into China to help Chiang fight the CCP, the U.S. was not willing to commit American soldiers, or airplanes, or tanks to China. Seeing no other option, in 1949, Chiang and the GMD will retreat to the island of Taiwan just off the Chinese coast. More than 2 million men and civilians crossed the Taiwanese Straits to the island. Thus, in 1949, there were two Chinas. The government on the mainland, now known as the People's Republic of China, was controlled by Mao Zedong and the Communists. Chiang Kai-shek's government on the island of Taiwan was known as the Republic of China. Both governments claimed to represent the real China. And over the next 30 years, China and Taiwan will prove to be one of the hottest spots in the Cold War, as the People's Republic of China came to be allied to the Soviet Union, while Chiang's Republic of China became one of the U.S.'s strongest allies in Asia. The U.S. has even from time to time sent in the 7th Fleet to defend Taiwan from an expected Chinese invasion. All right. With that said, that's the end of our talk on the Chinese Civil War. In our future conversations, we will talk about how Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communists put their visions of a communist China into play on mainland China. Thank you very much.